Hello everyone and welcome. With today's video, I want to do some examples, and as I'm thinking about it, this might be a longer video, so I'm going to break it up into shorter chunks so that it's not too long for all of you. Here's what I want to do. I want us to practice the topic of spatial separations. So right here, okay, top right corner is where I'm going to put the link to the topic itself, topic 8. And you can also find it linked in the description at the bottom. Just to remind you what this video is about, if you remember from the topic itself, it's about figuring out how much of each face of any building, part 3 building that is allowed to be an unprotected portion of face, so that fire essentially can get right through and affect nearby building or nearby people. In general terms, that's what the topic is. But what we're going to be doing basically is looking at the topic itself, which is from Volume 1, Division B, Part 3, Subsection 3.2.3, which is called Spatial Separations and Exposure Protection. What you're going to be needing for these examples that we're going to be doing together are these 5 tables, okay, the ones that are just going over my forehead right now. That's table 3.2.1, sorry, 3.2.3.1b all the way to E. That's 4 tables, plus table 3.2.3.7. I'll show you in a moment where I get them from. You're also going to be needing Appendix A, specifically A 3.1.2.11. Now, I have these items in hard copy, right, from the building code, but I've also digitized them, so I'll bring them up on screen for you. But when you have a moment, please grab these so you can follow along and do these examples with me. Now, I'm going to move over there to show you where I get these 5 tables from. Okay? Okay, so this is Volume 1 of your building code. We're going to Part 3. That's again under 3.2.3, which is Spatial Separation and Exposure Protection. Okay, just to show you that right here, Spatial Separation and Exposure Protection. And I've already taken out the tables themselves. I have them here. There is 3.2.3.1b, C, D, and E. And furthermore, there's also this table here, 3.2.3.7. Okay, just gonna bring them over main screen. Now, like I've said, the hard copy is what you have for the building code, but I've digitized them. I'll show them on screen, and that's what we're going to be using. And what I want to do, now that we have these items handy, is move on to the examples themselves. Let me just show them to you right here. There we go. So we have this example set up, which I'm going to describe for you, which will then lead to me explaining to you also how the chapters are going to work in the description below. So what we have here to cover the topic of spatial separations is this set of drawings. Okay? So in general terms, we have here a building A, as you can see it on screen. I'm just going to make it more noticeable right here. Okay. We have a building A right here. We have a building B, and a set of property lines that go around building A and building B. There's some other type of existing building. So this drawing here, the site plan, gives us all the plan dimensions. Then we also have this set of drawing here, the section, or the building elevations if you want, however you want to look at them, which provide the vertical dimensions of each building, including what their occupancies are. Okay, so you can see right here, we have arena, which is A3 occupancy here. And then here, both stories of building B are another assembly occupancy, which in our case is A2. How did I get these major occupancies for these buildings? Well, as of right now, in the top right corner, I'm going to link the video for it, which relates to the better way of finding the major occupancies of these buildings. It's also going to be linked in the description at the bottom. But essentially, I used Appendix A. Okay. And for these two buildings, what we're being asked to do in this very specific case, so right here, for these two unsprinklered buildings, we're being asked for each face of each building, so that's A and B, to figure out the maximum allowed area of unprotected openings that are permitted by code, as well as the construction requirements for each exposed building face. Okay? Now, we're going to do, with today's video, building A. Okay? Building B will be a separate video. I think if you want me to do it, I'll create it. But the way we're going to do it with building A is we have here a north face, we have here an east face, we have here a south face, and we have here a west face. Okay? Thanks to the north arrow that you see right here. Okay? So what I'm going to do is the chapters for this video that you see linked at the bottom are going to be north, east, south, west. Okay? That's the way they're going to be set up. If I find that this is too long, I'll break this down into two videos. Maybe northeast in this video, southwest for the next video. Okay? So let's get to it. So what we need to do then, in order to figure out the maximum allowable area of unprotected openings for each face, we're going to start with the north face, right here. Okay? And first things first, as I'm getting set up for this, okay, we have to figure out certain geometric properties of each face of each building. Okay? So let's start with first, geometric properties. H and L. Okay, and we're going to do this in meters. We're going to do this in meters. Okay. Now, H is the vertical dimension of that exposed building face. Okay, so for the north face, H is the vertical dimension for it. It goes from, let me write this down because it's super important. H goes from average grade all the way to the highest ceiling. Okay? Super important. That's how the vertical dimension is defined for this topic. Average grade to highest ceiling. For the purposes of our tests, final exams, that kind of thing, these will be obvious. Okay? You don't have to go and search for them. They should be obvious for you to do. So let's go look at this. For building A, the dimension that I'm looking at is right here. Okay? It goes from average grade to highest ceiling. Not to the top of the roof, but to the highest ceiling. In this case, it's 6 meters. Okay? Right. L is the horizontal length of that face. So I'm going to go to the north face and find what the horizontal length is that north face. Here is my north face. Here is the corresponding horizontal dimension. What I'm going to place right here. Oh, right here, 17 meters. now that I have these properties, I need a couple more geometric properties. The next one that I need, it is super important, is going to be limiting distance, which is the maximum distance allowed between the face of the building and either the property line or a fictitious location between two buildings or the middle of a street. It all depends on what that face of the building is facing. Okay, so what you want to do to figure out what the appropriate limiting distance is go and check out the definition for limiting distance. And do you know where you find the definitions for limiting distance in the Ontario Building Code? Where do you find the definition for any word? Well, as of right now, in the top right corner of the screen, as well as in the description of this video, I'm going to link for you a video I posted not too long ago about definitions in the Ontario Building Code. So let's go look at what the north face of a building is showing us. So the north face again is right here. Okay, it's the north face, and it's facing a property line right here. That's all it's facing. So the limiting distance is 5 meters right there. That's what I'm going to show. I'm going to write down 5 meters equals to 5 meters. Now we're almost ready to get started. Only other thing that we need here is the occupancy, the major occupancy for the A building. So what we found here, arena. Okay, you see it right here. Arena A3. Okay, we've established how to do that. If you don't remember, go and check out my videos about how to find the major occupancy of a building. I'm just going to write this down here, A3. Great. Now that we have all of this, we are ready to solve this question. North face, figuring out the percentage of unprotected area for that face. Okay, so now that we have this, we're going to be calculating a few things. We're going to find area. And in this specific case, I'm going to define the area as H times L. Okay, we're also going to determine H over L as a ratio. We're also going to determine L over H as a ratio. So let's do these together. Area, L times H, the horizontal dimension times the vertical dimension. That's going to be 4.6 meters times 17 meters. When I multiply those two numbers, best 2 out of 3, I get 78.2 meters squared. Okay? All right, so let's leave that for a moment like that. H over L, that's the ratio of the horizontal to, the vertical to horizontal dimension. That's going to be, what do we have? 4.6 meters divided by L, which is 17 meters. Best 2 out of 3. What do we get for that? We just put on a calculator handy right here. 4.6 divided by 17. 0.27. 0.7. And it's unitless, right? Because meter and meter cancels out. Let's also do the reciprocal, L over H, which is 17.0 meters divided by 4.6 meters. Gives us, as 2 out of 3, 3.69. Okay? Now that we have all of these numbers figured out, whatever they might mean, we need to figure out, before we go any further, what table. Remember those 5 tables that we figured out? Well, we have to use one of them to figure out the percentage of unprotected opening, unprotected area. So we have to go look between table 3.2.3.1b all the way to the E table. It's going to be one of these 4 tables. How do we know which one to pick? I'm going to tell you and then I'm going to show you. Okay? You first have to start with whether or not your building is sprinklered or unsprinklered. Sprinklered or unsprinklered? Are there sprinklers on the building? Well, we found out in our specific case that the answer is that all of our buildings are unsprinklered. So since it's unsprinklered, I'm just going to write it as sprinklered like this. Okay? That means that we're only allowed to use either that B table or that C table. Okay? Because B and E are actually sprinklered. So this table is out, this table is out, because both of these tables are actually sprinklered. But no good, because our buildings are actually unsprinklered. So the question is, which one of these two do we use? Do we use B or do we use C? Well, that's where our occupancy comes in. Our occupancy is A3. So as I'll show you in a moment when I bring up the table itself, table B allows for A-type occupancies. So that's the one we pick. So now let me show you exactly what I'm getting at. Okay? So here are the tables themselves. Okay? So I've digitized those tables that I was talking to you about. They're all here. Okay? Let me take you to the, let me take you right here. Just give me a second. So let me take you to the table, the way each table is set up. Notice how under the name of the table, it says whether or not it's sprinklered or unsprinklered. In our case, B and C, as you'll see when you look them up, they're both not sprinklered. Furthermore, right here, for each table, it tells you what groups and occupancies are allowed to be used. In our case, for B, so that's 3.2.3.1b sembrato, it's for non-sprinklered occupancies, and it's also for A, C, D, and F3. Since our building is not sprinklered and an A2 building, that means we must use this table. Okay, so let's go back to our question and let's formalize this. Okay, here, go. So the table we're going to be using is table 3.2.3.1b. Again, because it's an A2 occupancy and it's not sprinklered. Now, we have to use all these quantities we just figured out to find out where on the table we get these values. Okay? So let me show you again. Let me bring up that table. You see here how this column calls for maximum area, and this column calls for ratio of L over H and H over L. And this set of rows here calls for limiting distance. Well, that's what we just figured out. I'm going to show you how to use them. Okay? So let's start with the area, the first column, the leftmost column. Okay? What we have to do is figure out where our area, 78.2 square meters, falls. Where does it appear? Well, 78.2 square meters is somewhere between 60 and 80 square meters. It's one or the other. So what do we use? Let's go back and I'll show you. Here, for the area, we always round up, because this is the minimum area we're using, okay? So you can't bring it down to 60, you have to bring it up to the closest higher number. that. Oh. So we have to use 80 square meters in table. There we go. Okay. So now we know that we have to use 80 as the row in the table. Well, what about now these two ratios? Which one do we use? First of all, we calculated 2. We always use the larger one. Okay? So not this one, because it's the smaller one of the two. You want to use the larger one. Okay. Now, the way that this ratio works, I'm just going to write it here. That is 3.69 is the same as writing 3.69 to 1 as a ratio. Okay? Because anything divided by 1 is still that number. Well, now let's compare the way that the table shows it. In the table, again, we figured out we're going to be using this row here, 80. But now we have 3 rows to pick from. Less than 3 to 1, 3 to 1 to 10 to 1, and over 10 to 1. Which one do we use? We have to pick the closest one, but never smaller. So we have 3.69 for our ratio, and it falls here in this middle row of the 3 to 1, 10 to 1. So that means that somehow we have to use this row right here. Okay? That row right there. The question is, which column are we going to use? Well, that's where the limiting distance comes into play. The one that we calculated. So let's go back and find the limiting distance we calculated. Limiting distance that we calculated shows right here, right? We get 5 meters. When it comes to then matching the correct column in the table, we always want to round down, okay? Because the value that you get for your drawing, for your specific building, is always the highest it can be. You can't go any higher. So in the table, we have to see if we can find 5 in the limiting distance columns. And if we can't, we go down to the nearest one. Let's go see what the table gives us. The table gives us, look at this right here. It does have a column for 5. Right there. See it? So what we want then is this column right here. Right? Which leaves us with a number of 29. 29 is where the rows and the columns match. Okay? I'm going to try to circle it with a mouse. I'm not very good at it. Close. Not bad. 29 is the value that we get here where the column and the row match. Let's go back, write this up. So now from this table, select percentage area equals to 29. Now I'm going to add the percent just to make it obvious, okay? That's what we get. That 29 we get is the percentage of the north face that's allowed to be unprotected. Now I also want to add here for the limiting distance right here, you should write down use 5 meters in table. As we wrote down here the value that we're using for the area, we should also write here for the ratio, use between 3 to 1 and 10 to 1, right? This way, anybody reviewing your work, like your professor or a colleague in the office or on the field, can tell exactly how you arrived at that solution. If you're one of my students also, this is how you must write it in the test or the final exam so that you get full marks. If you don't write it, you won't get full, because you must explain to me how you arrived at the answer, which is right here. Okay? So, now we're not quite finished for the north face yet. The final thing we have to do is figure out what the construction requirements are of that north face. And the construction requirements are obtained from table. Remember, that was the 5th table. Got this table 3.2.3.7. Let me just make a note right here. It's up here. From table 3.2.3.7, we get the construction requirements. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the table first to show you the values and how to get them, and then I'm going to write them down here. So let me bring up table 3.2.3.7 right here. Okay, here it is. So I'm just going to move it up a little bit. No, I think it's okay. So again, we have to start by looking in this column, which is the major occupancy. You remember our major occupancy was A, so we're going to be using this set of rows right here. Then we look at this column here. That's where the percentage of unprotected area comes in. We had 29%. That means we have to look at this row now. Finally, what we get are this value, and this value, respectively, for the minimum fire resistance rating, the type of the construction required for the structure, the type of construction required for the cladding. So let's formalize this. Okay? Let's go back to our tablet. So, from this table, we get the construction requirements, which are fire resistance rating, 45 minutes. We get that the construction type is going to be combustible or non-combustible. And finally, the cladding type. I'm just using short form, so you would write it out, obviously. Table would be non-combustible. Okay, and that's it for the for this face. So I would then summarize this to make it super obvious and mistakable. That. Okay, and that's it for the north face. So now let's do the east face. Hi everyone, I'm sneaking into this video to say it's going on too long. So instead of a part 2 for the south and west face, we'll move the east face to part 2 and then the south and west face on to part 3. Thank you for your patience. We'll cut it here. Thank you. Bye.